Welcome back. In this video we're going to be adding collision detection and response to allow the car to pick up flags. We'll also be getting the fuel gauge working too. I'm actually going to do the voiceover for this video rather than talking live as I normally do. I installed a new audio device and it didn't check the recordings, and when I came back to the edit I found out the audio had dropped every couple of seconds like a small child playing with a volume control on a radio. Not good. So you get present me filling in for past me. Plus my voice is going apparently. This is going well. First things first, I create a class that I will later regret the name of called Car Fuel Gauge. It'll be the class that we use to pick up flags, update the player score, keep tabs on the lives, etc. and update the fuel gauge of course. The class needs a reference to the sidecar that was created all the way back in video 1. Sidebar exposes a number of properties that control the visuals of the score, the fuel gauge, the radar, etc. I googled the scoring chart for the game and found this. I try to follow this as much as possible, but it's a bit vague about points for remaining fuel and how many points per fuel cell you get when you hit a lucky flag, but I can figure that out later. For now, let's implement the score. Back in Car Fuel Gauge, I add fields for the score, the current player, which is either a 1 or a 2 for the first and second players respectively, and for the current round, which I'll hardcode to 1 for this video. I thought about updating the score inside the while loop, but that didn't make any sense because the fuel depletes every 2 seconds, so that would mean the score would update every 2 seconds. Updating the score should in fact be instant, so instead I'll update the score when the player picks up a flag or gets points per fuel cell when they hit the lucky flag. It was at this point I realised that I hadn't added a lucky flag prefab, so I quickly added that. It's just a copy of the special flag prefab. In fact, I actually forget that I don't have a lucky flag graphic, so I just use the special flag as well. I add some constants to the Car Fuel Gauge class for the number of points per flag. We need to keep tabs on the number of flags collected too. The score for each flag is the number of points per flag multiplied by the flag number. So the first flag is 100, the second is 200, third is 300, and so on. Not having figured out how collision detection response will work, I go about adding methods that we're going to use when the player picks up a flag, a lucky flag, and a special flag. These are the methods that will update the visual score. The lucky flag is interesting because the game actually pauses while the fuel is counted. This means that we're going to have to stop the player and the baddies when we put them in the game. And the game has to remember the fuel that we actually have remaining and restore it after the fuel has been counted. I don't have a pause function in Locomotion, so I'm going to add that one here too. And in fact, I actually make a mistake here by not using yield return null, and instead I use a break in the while loop. This causes Unity to lock up. It takes a bit of investigation on my part to find this, so I'm going to skip that and keep this video runtime down. Oblivious to my error, I go back into Visual Studio and start editing the map generator to generate the lucky, the special, and the ordinary flags. I realise that I need a flag type enum to specify these different values of flag, so that I'm going to know which ones to spawn and which ones the player has hit. This also means that the flag property that map generator exposes to the sidebar to allow that class to generate blobs also needs to know what type of flag it is. So I need to create another basic class that I'm going to call flag map blob. Great names, huh? That's going to store the position of the flag and its type. By default, Visual Studio adds namespaces to new classes, so that has to go. I strip the namespaces out of there and then just leave the bare classes in the 2 new files. The random flag position generator then gets the flag type logic added to it. The first flag generated is the lucky flag, the next flag is the special flag, all other flags are just normal flags. This actually works out really well. The radar logic also needs to change, so for now, so that it's easy to find when I'm playing the game, when I'm debugging, I make the lucky flag flash between red and yellow on the map. It's actually the special flag that does this in the game. This gets fixed at the end of the video, so don't worry about that. We've done a lot of work so far to get to this point, so it's actually quite trivial to change the blob colors. We just pass in 2 values instead of just the yellow, so we pass in the red and the yellow, and that causes the flag to flash inside the radar. The last part of this section is I choose the prefab to use based on the type of flag. I forgot to do this bit in the map generator logic, so I go back in and add that to the for each loop. To make collisions work in Unity, one of the game objects must have a rigid body attached to it, and both objects must have a collider. I'll give the flags the rigid bodies and mark them as static. Their box colliders will be triggers instead of actual colliders. The race car will also get a collider as well. I spent a bit of time debugging why the collisions won't detect. Turns out the car collider was only 1 by 1 pixel and offset as well. Remember we did all that stuff a couple of videos ago about that? So I added the offset to the collider, which is like 12 along, 12 down to match the car shape position, and expanded its size to 16 by 16. Collisions now work. The collectible flag class will hold information on what flag is being collected. I thought about using the type but ended up going with a string in the end, so it's either just lucky, special, or just flag. I added an on-trigger 2D method to the car fuel gauge class to handle collision responses. I can then check to see if the game object that triggered the collision contains a collectible flag class, and if it did, the name is checked, the name property is checked, and the appropriate function is called, whether that's pickup flag, pickup lucky flag, or pickup special flag. That's the functions we just defined in the last section. The car fuel gauge also needs to be paused when the lucky flag is hit because it automatically ticks down the fuel. I also realized that I had a bug in the code that updates the score. I needed to increment the flag count before doing any calculations, so I fixed that too. And this is where I realized my earlier mistake with the yield brake part. It's a quick fix, but it took a bit of time to figure it out in the first place. I do a lot of that off camera anyway. The car is still moving, but at least the fuel gauge was being tallied correctly. A look at the locomotion class revealed the problem. The position was being updated outside. It was being updated during the update loop outside of the if pause check. Wrapping the whole thing inside an if pause fixed the problem. The last part is to update the radar and remove the radar blob associated with the flag when it's picked up. This means we have to pass in a reference to the flag created in the map to the flag map blob class. Try saying that 3 times fast. This will be passed to the constructor of that class in the map generator. In the sidebar, we add a dictionary that will map the flag game object in the world to another game object. That other game object is the flag radar blob. In another stroke of naming genius, I call the variable flag actual to radar. Snappy. I also realised at this point, I realised quite a lot at this point, in various points in this video, that I created a class member called flag prefab, and that should only be local to the start method. Another quick fix: a delete here and a move around here. I move the member field and add a local variable to hold the current in the loop prefab instance. The remove flag method that gets created calls destroy on the radar blob associated with the actual flag game object. This gets called from the car fuel gauge's on trigger enter 2D method when the flag is picked up. And the last wee bit was to fix up the lucky flag. I'd forgotten that I'd updated the PNG of the sprite sheet, but not the sprite sheet itself. After a quick trip to the sprite editor, the image was fixed, and I pointed the lucky flag's prefab to use it. Back in the code, I changed the if lucky to if special to make sure that it was consistent with the game. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. A little bit different to my usual code along videos, but hopefully still enjoyable for you. If you liked it, please give me a thumbs up and share on social media. It really helps the channel out. And if you want some timely reminders when I put new videos up, hit the subscribe and notification bell, and YouTube will let you know when I post up next. Until next time, thank you very much for watching. Bye bye.